That's one of the few times the word expertise has been used in relation to me. That's for sure. But I really am glad to be here and to be with you guys. I've been able to attend a few of the sessions, and I've certainly enjoyed that. Um, I really don't know. Well, when Walter asked me to do this, my first thought was, well, maybe we ought to ask Vanderbilt Baptist Church to come with me because it's not just me that allowed me to stay in one place this long. I mean, there's a whole church full of people that have allowed this to happen, and for them, I'm very thankful. I want to tell you my favorite story, and then I'll get into the discussion. Okay? You may have heard this before, and if you have, just laugh. All right? Couple was known for they've been married for 50 years, and for 49 of those years, they fought like cats and dogs. Whole town knew about this. New pastor came to town. He was known for his counseling abilities. So the townsfolk made an appointment and asked this couple if they would meet with this new young pastor. They said, "Well, I guess we will." Came the time of the appointment, and they went into the pastor's office, sat down, and they had been there 5 minutes, and they were fighting like cats and dogs. Pastor leaned back in his chair and sized up the situation very quickly. He said, "Okay, time out, time out." He got up from his chair, walked around the desk, went over to the old lady. He picked her up, pulled her close to him, and he laid a kiss on her like you wouldn't believe. It wasn't a chicken kiss like a little peck on the lips. This was a fish kiss where you don't come up for air. I mean, he put one on her. He pushed her away and he looked over to the old man and he said, "Okay, that needs to be done at least 3 times a week." The old man said, "Well, that's fine with me. I'll bring her to you Monday, Wednesday, Friday." Yeah, there was a little bit of misunderstanding there, and I pray that none of that happens during this session tonight. But I really am glad to be here. Okay, I started out and I was hoping I could get. In fact, when I first started on this, made a list of things I would share with you. It looked like I was going to be able to do 7 simple steps for staying at a Southern Baptist church. I like alliteration, if you can't tell. But it didn't work out. I thought of the eighth one. So we're just going to call this 7 plus 1, all right? But here, let me just go ahead and get started. The first one is this, I've learned this over the years. Didn't really think about it until I sat down and started reviewing my time at Vanderbilt. But here's the first one: when God calls you to a place, be ready to stay in that place. Now, y'all hear that? When God calls you to a place, be ready to stay in that place. When God called and allowed us to come to Vanderbilt Baptist Church, I had been in youth and music ministry for 10 years. So when I found out about Vanderbilt Baptist Church, in fact, I didn't even know what a Vanderbilt was when they first called. But when they first called, I was so excited. I didn't care where this pastor was going to be. And my wife, she was pretty excited about it too. We had an 11-month old daughter. And anyway, when we moved to Vanderbilt, they only promised us $500 and a place to live. $500 a month and a place to live. Now that's 24 years ago, and that's things were a little bit different. But I had to go to work, had to do some things besides being pastor of the church, and I didn't mind that because I like to see a smile on my wife's face when I brought home money to buy groceries. Okay, and I like to be able to feed my little daughter. So, in fact, they wouldn't even let us see the parsonage. When we came down to preach in view of a call, it was being remodeled. They said it was in too bad a shape. So we didn't really know what we were going to do other than we were going to live in this house that they were supposedly working on, and they promised us $500 a month. Now, I don't know, I don't recall coming to Vanderbilt and thinking, okay, I'm going to stay here for 2 or 3 years and I'll be somewhere else. I don't recall thinking that. I do know that when I first moved to Vanderbilt, that was pretty much the norm. Baptist pastors would go to a place and stay 2 or 3, maybe 4 years, and they would go someplace else. Now, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But I never thought about doing that. My wife and I celebrated 49 years of marriage last Friday, and we were riding on our way to go out to eat, and I told her, I said, you know, when we first got married, I never thought that we would. I never on that day we got married, I never thought, wow, you know, we're going to be married 49 years someday. I didn't think about that. All I knew is that when we were married, and we were going to stay married, as far as I was concerned. And we just, you know, we got up, we go to bed at night, we get up the next morning, we do our thing, we go to bed at night, and just over and over. That's kind of the way it was when I came to Vanderbilt. I didn't really think about going somewhere else. All I knew is that God had called me to Vanderbilt Baptist Church, and intended to minister to people as long as I was there. So let me just tell you this: do not dust off your resume at the first sign of opposition. I've seen this happen so many times. As soon as a problem arises, guys they're ready to go somewhere else. And I think, man, they're missing out on God working a lot of times. The Apostle Peter, Apostle Paul, faced opposition. He didn't run for the hills. You know, he let God use him to work out the different differences between people, and sometimes, you know, things would get better, but he never did run just at the first sign of opposition. I think the Apostle Peter was like that as well. So I think we need to remember that when God calls us to a place, we need to be ready to stay in that place. He called us through that place for a certain reason. And if we run at the first sign of trouble, we keep him from doing some good things, not only in our lives, but also in the lives of the people around us. Okay? So we need to drop the notes. So don't dust off your resume. Just because you think you have a, but maybe also remember this: when it gets time to make some proposal, you know, every time, I guess, anytime a pastor goes to a new place, he starts surveying the situation and starts looking at things that he can maybe improve or help or change. Uh, let me suggest this: just because you think you have a good idea doesn't mean you have a good idea. Okay? We pastors do not have a monopoly on the truth. We don't even have a monopoly on what God wants us to do with the church. He has. We think we have a monopoly on that, but not always. So remember that God talks to other people as well. And I learned that if I bring up an idea and I cannot convince them that this is what we need to do, back off. Don't try to force anything. Okay? It's always a good because if you try to change too much at once, almost always you're going to guarantee a pushback from people. So you need to be patient. Sometimes I learned it. Uh, sometimes you're saying, "Hey, look, why don't we try this?" Let me give you this example. When we moved to Vanderbilt, no one had lived in the parsons for a long time. It's full time, pastor there. We went in December. Well, about the middle of March, I said, okay, let's start planning on vacation Bible school. These people, there were only about 17, 19 people there. They looked at me like I did, they thought, what is this guy talking about? They hadn't had vacation Bible school in years. And I thought they was in the Bible. I thought you had to have vacation Bible school. So I said, okay, let's just try this. Well, we tried it that year. And it was amazing. All these kids just came out of the woodwork. So sometimes just saying, hey, let's try this. If it doesn't work, we won't do it again. But anyway, the first thing is when God calls you to a place, be ready to stay in that place. He didn't call you there for just because God didn't have anything else to do. Remember, God calls us to these places because He has a reason, a purpose. Okay? All right, here's the second thing. Get to know people so you can know their needs. You cannot minister to people if you don't know what's going on in their lives. And you can't get to know them if you don't spend time with them. I know I don't understand pastors who never socialize with the people. who never invite people over to their house or go out to eat together. I just never have understood that. If you're going to be at a place, if God calls you to a place, try to be a part of the community. Uh, Learn this early. You know, especially in a small community, go to every football game you can. Go to every basketball game you can. Even if you're not a sports fan, go anyway. I don't know how many times I sat with the cold wind blowing in my face at a football game. Man, alive, I sure would like to be home watching something on television. But it's amazing because the next week or the next Sunday, next time the church gets together, how much that has how much that influences and affects those young kids that saw you sitting in the stands. I have stood at the finish line of a cross country meet out in the sun. They were so impressed that their pastor came to watch them. You got to get to know people in order to minister to them. You need to know what kind of problems they have. And it's amazing how people will respond to your involvement in their lives. Here's the second part of the second point. You got to get to know God and spend time with Him in order to know how to meet people's needs. Um, he can guide you in helping them and solving their problems, helping them grow in Jesus. It's sometimes all people want is somebody to listen to them. I've learned that. You know, all this is going to be broadcast. I'm going to say it anyway, especially women. Sometimes all women want is for somebody to listen to them. Well, there's a woman back there. I may be in trouble with her, but sometimes that's all women want is for somebody to listen to them. Nobody listens to them at home. You got to be careful. Got to be careful because there's some bonds that can be formed there that you didn't really intend to be formed. But sometimes it's just that's all people want. Even guys just want somebody to listen to them. There you go. Exactly. Uh, I've told people this about when somebody passes away. Uh, if they're a member of your church, if they're just a friend, they say, I just don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. And I tell them, you don't have to say anything. Because sometimes all they want is to see somebody else there, that ministry of presence. Because I can promise you, there's nothing you could say to them that'll take that hurt away from them. God's word can do that sometimes, but there's no. The real secret is to just be there for people, and that's a very important part. Just listening to them, being with them, the ministry of presence. All right, here's the third thing: stay prayed up, or you'll be tempted to give up. Stay prayed up, or you'll be tempted to give up. Whether you have college, seminary degree, um, makes no difference. The most important thing that we can do as pastors is to pray, 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 and pray. And when you get through praying, pray some more. Prayer is being obedient, but it's also is the source of our power and our strength and our wisdom. Um, we can know a lot about the scriptures. Praying to God lets us know what and when to say to people certain things. Know when to quote certain scriptures. Um, I use abbreviations, especially when I'm making notes. And I was making notes for this, and up at the top it said instead of pastor in training, I put PIT, and I looked up at it. It says that spells pit. Well, guess what? If you're a pastor, you're going to find yourself in the pit. One of my favorite songs is Psalm 103. You know, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Forget not all of his benefits. Well, verse 4 says, he redeems us from destruction, but it can also be translated the pit. He redeems us from the pit. Now, I can promise you, folks, if you have not already been in the pit, you will be. You will be. And in the pit, sometimes not only it's dark as it's deep, but somebody will come along and put the top over. You'll find yourself in complete darkness and just be so despondent and discouraged because it's different situations. If you're not praying, you're going to find yourself very discouraged easily and for a long time. Case in point, found myself in a pit. This was early in my ministry, and there were some things that were happening, and I just could not handle them. It just seemed like it get worse and worse. And one of the things I did is I just started praying through the Psalms. It was amazing. I was lower than a snake's belly when I started, and before you knew it, I was right at heaven's door. Because God is the one who redeems us from the pit. Don't forget that. Prayer can do that for us. Okay? All right, number four. Never stop learning. Never stop learning. I don't care if you are as doctored as Dr. Walter Jackson. Never stop learning. Um, read the Bible for sure, but read good books. Man, Walters has offered all kinds of really good reading material. Read good books. Read good authors. Attend workshops, seminars, conferences um, on preaching, on pastoring, on evangelism, or discipleship. Never stop learning because I promise you, folks, we're not as smart as we think we are most of the time. We can always learn something, and so never stop learning. Be on the lookout for ways you can improve your the information you get. And here's number five: make sure your works match your words. Now you say, well, that kind of goes with that saying. You're right, most of the time. I tell you, if you are a pastor, you will get to know other pastors. And one of the things that I learned very quickly is not every pastor is the person they seem to be in the pulpit. And eventually, that will show up somewhere. I remember pastor. We were playing it's kind of volleyball league, and this is a pastor some of you might even know. I will give you his name. And when the game got tough and close, I thought, what is wrong with this guy? He was complaining about this and that, and he was arguing with the officials over where the ball was out. And I thought, this guy needs to get saved. That's what I was thinking. He wasn't acting like a Christian. He certainly wasn't acting like a preacher. Now, I don't know how that affected his witness. I know how it affected his witness to me. But man, I tell you what, if our words do not match our works, people won't stop listening to our words. Make sure your works match your words. Here's another part of that. Never ask your people to do something you're not willing to do. And that's for everything. Um, Evangelism is one. Don't ask your people to go out and share the gospel if you're not doing that. Don't ask people to serve and volunteer to set up tables if you're not willing to do that. I still don't think they have a degree at seminary on putting up tables and chairs, but if you're in a small situation, you're gonna get to do that, whether you want to or not. Okay, so make sure that your works match your words. Here's the sixth thing: be able to laugh at yourself when you make a mistake, because more than likely people are laughing too. I had been at Vanderbilt Baptist Church until it came in January, back when they did the January Bible study. Anybody remember that? We were in the book of Ephesians, I recall. I don't remember what passage it was or what we were talking about exactly. But there's a section in there about sexual immorality. And I remember I was going to say, I was going to use an example. And I was going to say, now this may sound hokey. And then I said, no, I want to say this may sound corny. And the problem is, I put the two words together. Okay? Now you can imagine what that was. Well, I want you to know that didn't hear another word I said the rest of the night. Okay? There were some old ladies, 80-year-old ladies, that turned red laughing so hard. And what I did was, I just stopped laughing with them. Because at that point, there's no sense in trying to cover that up. Okay? Uh, but other things that have happened, you make a mistake, it reveals to people, and you know what? This guy's just like us. He's not perfect either. Now, Vanderbilt learned that pretty early. Okay, but just remember, it helps to laugh at yourself because I can promise you that when you make a mistake, other people are laughing at you as well. You what? Yes. I was preaching about Boaz one time, and I said, "Can you imagine anybody naming their child Boaz?" One of the ladies down there said, "Well, my daughter did." Well, of course, that broke up with the whole crowd. And but anyway, just laugh, just laugh. If you make a mistake, just go with it. I'm telling you, man. The worse you try to cover it up, the worse it gets. All right. Now, and here's number 7. Okay. And if this this is one of those things that I had a hard time dealing with because when I went to Vanderbilt Baptist Church, I thought I don't know if anybody else is like this or not, but I went to Vanderbilt Baptist Church. I thought, man, the crowds would just start showing up. So here's number 7. You are not Billy Graham. You're not Chuck Swindoll. You're not Vody Balcom. You're not Ed Young. You're not Tony Evans. You're not John MacArthur. And listen to this: you will never be any of those people. And that's a good thing because if you're some of you, you'd be dead, or you would have just resigned from your church. Okay, so you'll never be those things. You'll never be those people. So get over it. But that's a good thing. You need to be glad that you're not these people. Um, God called you to be Jesus through your spiritual gifts, your talents, your abilities, and your personality. God wants to share Jesus through you. If he wanted John MacArthur to be at Vanderbilt Baptist Church, he would have called John MacArthur. He didn't. And I'm glad. Because that way I get to be there, right? God called us to be who we are, wherever we are. And he wants to share Jesus through us and our personalities. In fact, I really believe that there's some people who would never be reached unless you reach them. God wants you to reach people wherever you are. Okay? And here's the plus one. Okay, we're going to be done. Wow, this is record time. Okay? Here's the plus one. And this is one thing I learned early, and I'm glad I did. Still reminded of this on several occasions. But God's grace is sufficient for all occasions in every situation. I don't care where you are, Vanderbilt Baptist Church or First Baptist Church, Dallas. God's grace is always sufficient. We there have been several situations that my wife's health got bad a couple of times, and during those times, it got kind of dark and discouraging. But during those times, God's grace was always sufficient. He always got us through those times. There was times when Vanderbilt Baptist Church was not as strong financially as we are today. And I didn't know if I was going to have to get another job, just leave town. I didn't want to, and people didn't want me to, but they just sometimes you have these serious financial problems. But always God showed up, and His grace was always sufficient for every situation. Um, had this illustrated to me through one of these guys that I always considered a pillar of Texas Baptist or Southern Baptist. And you may have heard of Herschel Hobbs, Dr. Herschel Hobbs. I was at First Baptist Church, Groom, Texas, just east of Amarillo, for a couple of years as music and youth camp. In fact, that's where we were when Katrina and I got married. And while we were there, Herschel Holmes was invited to come and do a revival at our church. It was really amazing. He's a great preacher. He's an author of several books. I still remember he was preaching. I thought, man, what translation is he using? After the service, I said, Dr. Hobbs, yours is not matching with mine. It doesn't sound like anything else I've ever read. He opened it up and it was the Greek New Testament he was reading out of. And preaching, translating in his mind while he was preaching. Anyway, we had to have them in our home for a meal during we Baptists have to eat during revivals. We invited them to our house, and it was one of the strangest. It was really good time, but it was very interesting because he sat and talked about Billy and Ruth and how he had talked to them, Billy Graham and Ruth, his wife Ruth, and he talked about W. and Betty, who that is, W. A. Criswell, his wife Betty, and others. They used these names that were, I mean, you talk about giants in the faith. How he'd just been in their house and he'd seen these people and went to school with some of these guys. My mouth was just set open the whole time. We had a great visit, and revival went well. Anyway, he left. It was after we moved down here, and I got to working with the BSU, that we went to Glorietta for Student Week. And one of those weeks, several years after, I'd heard that his wife had passed away. Sweet lady. And anyway, while we were at Student Week at Glorietta, he was the Bible teacher that week. So one morning at breakfast, I saw him sitting there by himself. So I just went over to him and said, Dr. Hobbs, I'm Jack Hutson. I was at First Baptist Church Groom. And now, if I don't know whether he really recognized me or not, but he acted like he did, okay? But anyway, I sat down and I said, I'm just, but we did talk about Katrina fixed fried chicken, and he did remember that. But anyway, I said, look, I heard about your wife, and I'm just so sorry. And I'll never forget, he said, Jack, I have preached God's grace is sufficient for 50 years, but I never knew it was the truth until my wife died. What? Well, sometimes God allows these things to happen in our lives so they can prove to us that God's grace really is sufficient. It makes no difference what happens. God will always be God. No matter where you are, don't you ever forget that. Okay? You may be in a small church. You may be at some member junior here called First Baptist Church Podunk. Ever heard that term? Out in the middle of nowhere. But guess what? God knows where Podunk is. And wherever you are, don't forget God's grace is always sufficient. Okay? Now, let me close with another one of my favorite stories. Or Chuck Swindoll tell this story. So you know it's true. And we'll be done. She has some questions. Anyway, there was a young mother who had a young son who was taking those infamous piano lessons. He was about 8, 9 years old, and he just didn't like to practice. Now, he didn't mind going to the lessons or recitals, but he just hated to practice. He'd rather be outside, just like most young boys. Anyway, she was reading the paper and she noticed that this Ignacy Paderewski was coming to her city to play in concert. And she thought, well, maybe if I were to get tickets, take my young son to listen to him, this would encourage him to practice and he could become an accomplished pianist as well. She bought the tickets and the time of the concert, and they had front row seats. They sat down there, and up on the stage was this beautiful, shiny black Steinway piano, grand piano, you can imagine, and a leather tufted seat, or piano bench. Anyway, it was just gleaming, just inviting somebody, begging somebody to come play it. Well, while she was sitting there, she was talking to some people, some friends that are here on this side. And while she was having that conversation, her young son slipped out of the chair, out of the seat, and he walked around, went up the stairs, went to that grand piano, sat down there, and began to play chopsticks. Now you can hear people in the crowd saying, "Wait, what's that kid doing up there?" And then some of them started shouting, "Where's his mother?" Somebody else said, "Get that child off the stage." All the while, Paderewski was just off stage and he looked out and saw what was happening. He grabbed his coat, went up behind the young boy, put his arms around him, and began to improvise. And they played to a standing ovation. All the while, whispering in his ear, "Don't stop, don't quit." Folks, I don't care where you are serving, you need to be listening for that voice. Because things will get difficult. God never said being a pastor was a easy job. I can't find that in the Bible. And I know from personal experience, it can be the most rewarding thing that you'll ever do, but it can also be the most difficult. But you listen for God because He will tell you, listen to me. It's still small voice. Don't stop. Don't quit. Okay, I'm done. The first conflict we had was I hadn't been there very long, and there was one deacon, and he did everything. He's the guy who called me when we were in Amarillo. I'll never forget. He's a great guy. Um, he called me and told me about the church, but we decided we're going to have some elect some new deacons, and we decided we're going to elect two, I think it was, and one of them was divorced. Well, when people chose him, a lot of people you would know this person, Ike. When we chose him, he just blew up. And he made it well known to the whole church. And I went out there, I got one of the guys who was nominated as the deacon. It was a great, strong guy. We went out there to talk to him, and he didn't help me. It just got worse. And they were talking about leaving the church. And I didn't know what else to do except let them go. Because, one of the things I learned in the scriptures, I don't recall Jesus ever chasing someone down and begging them to follow him or to come back. I think that's strange or interesting. So sometimes you just got to let people go. Sometimes I've learned over the years. Sometimes you got to let God sift the wheat from the chaff. Sometimes He does that. And I can promise you, in 44 years, He's done that more than once. That's not fun. Steve knows. He's been there when that's happened. Uh, Sometimes that's the way it happens. And you just say, okay, God, I don't know what's going on here. Why? I mean, I think I know why, but you just let it play out. There you go. I can't fix everything. I promise. I've tried. I can't fix everything. Yes. There were a couple of times that I really thought that we were going to go someplace else. It's one place in particular. In fact, we drove all the way to Oklahoma. It's a great opportunity, even in Oklahoma. Okay, um, great church. They're debt free. They lived just outside of Lawton, big army base there. Houses everywhere. Great potential for growth. And in fact, they voted for us to come. It was, I can't remember, 90-1 or something like that. And we'd agreed that if it was unanimous, we'd go because I mean everything was going good at Vanderbilt. There's no reason to leave Vanderbilt. So when we left Paradise Valley to come home, I was writing out my resignation until I got home, and it's almost like God became strangely silent. He no longer said, "Yeah, this is where you want to go." So I thought, wait a minute, I'm the one who wanted to go. But that's a couple of times like that. I mean, if I'm not pastor, who's going to be Pastor Vanderbilt? I don't really, I can't imagine anything better than being Pastor Vanderbilt Baptist Church. You marry Katrina Joy Messer. That helps. But I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not sure I know how to answer that. Other than I have to remind myself sometimes, and sometimes church members do. We have a great relationship, especially among our deacons, and they can keep me humble. Okay, but I just remind myself, I'm just Jack Hutson. God is the one who's God. I try to get out of His way and let Him be God. In fact, that's the only explanation I have for what's happening. So, because we were, you know, we've been doing a lot of things the same way for several years. Then all of a sudden, man, all these people start showing up. They have these baptisms, and we got all this extra money, and they still won't let me go to the Bahamas with all that money. But uh, you know, God's blessing us still. We've had four, six baptisms since January, I guess. People joining, and all I can say is God's still moving. I'm going to just sit back and enjoy it. Yes, I think we could say yes. Well, let's see, not this past Sunday I was there, but the Sunday before, there's a young boy. He's 17. It's the second time he's preached for us. And then there was a young lady. They just came back from camp, and she's felt the call to be involved in missions somewhere. So God is moving among our young people. Uh, so yeah, I guess I can say yes to that question. Yeah, and there's like we've had two, Steve and Timmy. Timmy's not here tonight because his mother passed away, but Steve has been showing a real interest in being involved in ministry. Maybe just from a deacon's point of view. Maybe I don't know if it's going to go into anything else other than that, but yeah. But these guys have stepped up and they'll lead Bible studies or do whatever it takes. So I'm very thankful for that. Yes, yeah, I think that's true. And some of it's out of necessity. I don't have any choice, but there's something. Yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying sharing some things with them, showing them how to do things. There, and I I used to feel like I was the youngest person in the crowd. Now I'm the oldest one in the bunch. So some people are going to have to take over sometime. Has somebody taken over? Oh, not today. Uh, but I know it's going to happen someday. Yeah. Well, as far as me wanting to go someplace else, I don't think about that too often. I'm having too good a time right now. And if he wants me to, that's fine. He's going to have to make it a whole lot clearer than he has so far. But okay, anything else? I don't have all the answers, folks. I promise you. But God has been good, and I cannot overemphasize the fact that it not only takes a guy who's willing to stay, but it takes a church that's willing to let him stay. I think this, you know, I feel a little strange when people start patting me on the back for staying someplace so long. Well, it's because people let me do that. Okay. And another thing is, I didn't mention this, but One of the things I also learned is to earn the right to be heard. I don't remember who first said that, but that's a great lesson. Earn the right to be heard. Just because you're the preacher doesn't mean anybody's going to listen to you, first of all. And anybody wants to listen to you. Earn the right to be the pastor of these people, and then earn the right to be heard in the community. So that's one of the advantages of being someplace so long. I get to be the pastor of Vanderbilt, and I like that. All right, anything else? Okay, thank you.